Okay, this is Moshe coming to you from Israel and the Galilee. So what we're going to cover today is there's like two aircraft carriers. The Iwo Jima, which is one of those small landing ships that carries airplanes and helicopters, and they usually travel with two other vessels, plus the Nimitz aircraft carrier, which would normally travel with at least two other vessels, if not three or four. So you have, I would say you've got at least four. I'm sorry, you've got six warships down there by Cuba. And we're going to talk about Trump. He came out with a new thing. Now he's talking about Iran coming out and waving white flags and surrendering. And he did attack them the other day, and we're going to talk about why he attacked them. It had to do with laying mines. We'll get into all of that. Okay? And there's a lot of other stuff we're going to get into, such as why is America experiencing drought with heavy flooding rains? And that's something only God could do. Um, and there's other things we're going to get into today. There's a lot of news. I don't spend a lot of time talking about Russia and Ukraine, although they are fighting avidly. They have been for years, and I don't believe it's going to trigger any prophetic event. Okay, but what goes on with Israel in the Middle East, I wholeheartedly believe will trigger prophetic events. Okay, so I'm going to go into the live stream briefly and take a look at things and make sure they're okay. And something went off here. There we go. And I'm going to put a post up real quick. This thing with him in Cuba is, I mean, he seems definitely serious about it. Um, what he's going to do with Cuba, I don't know. I don't think he's going to make it a state. I mean, that I can't imagine that. Okay. A protectorate or something, I don't know, but not a state. I gotta do this for a few seconds here, get the post up, which um, if I talk too much, I'll make typos. Uh, it'll be over in a few seconds. Okay. Check for typos. And we're good. Let me pin it up. And I was pretty shocked when I realized the amount of firepower that Trump's got down there by Cuba. There wasn't any real press release about it. Somebody that helps me with posts and stuff sent me the U.S. Navy map of where the warships are that they want you to know about. They don't tell you where all their ships are, believe me, but you can find out where some of them are. I've never ever seen a Navy map for the public where they're going to show you where all their submarines are and their destroyers. I never heard of anything like that. Okay, so I looked at it and I see the Iwo Jima is there, and the Nimitz is there, and the Nimitz isn't going to go anywhere without at least two escorts, destroyers, missile cruisers. And the Iwo Jima usually travels in a group of three ships, and that's like a small aircraft carrier, carries perhaps a dozen vertical takeoff aircraft, and they have vertical takeoff stealth F-35s, and it carries helicopters and other things. So they usually carry a bunch of Expeditionary Force Marines with them, so they could be carrying 5,000 Marines or easily. That's all Cuba's going to need, you know, if even that. And you know, if there's any efforts by the Cuban military to stop America from doing what it's doing, the aircraft will be in the sky ready. And it's just boom, they'll swoop down and destroy anybody, any military action, except, you know, they're not going to be able to destroy a sniper or a group of 3 or 4 guys, you know, in the hills attacking or something like that. So that basically would drive the Cuban military forces into the hills. That's what they would do. Okay? And you know, I don't think Trump wants to get into a military action with Cuba, but Cuba knows that, and they probably want to push this with Trump to see how far he'll go. Now, he might do another Venezuela as an attempt, in other words, abduct the government leader or leaders of Cuba. You know, look, the people of Cuba are going to benefit if they get rid of this communist regime. There's no doubt about it. Okay? So we have to watch and see what happens, but something's going to happen. Either it's going to be a snatch and grab or an assassination on the leaders. And then America will try to diplomatically control things down there. Or it's going to be a takeover. Now, we don't know how many soldiers are in Guantanamo Bay where they have a base. Okay? There's a base in Guantanamo. And they could airlift thousands of troops there, and they're not going to tell us. And I don't know if the Cubans would know, probably. So we'll watch this. Okay, I'm going to do some praise. Being a Bible-believing site, Old and New Testament, and I have no control over who joins in or who doesn't join in. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 All right, look. Trump talked about making Greenland a 51st or 52nd state, right? Okay, what's different between Greenland and Cuba? Greenland has tremendous untapped potential for oil. It is strategically quite important for defense of America. But Greenland could conceivably pay for itself. In other words, the cost of making it a state would be tremendously high, and it could pay for itself with the oil it's thought to have in reserves that's untapped. Now, He also talked about doing that with Canada. Well, Canada doesn't have untapped oil. It has tapped, functioning, money producing oil in very large amounts. So Canada oil would wind up uh, under the control of America, partially, totally, somehow, some way, some shape or form. Okay, and it would, one way or another, be paying for the expense of running it as a state. Now, the Canadian people, I don't know why they would want to be a state in America. I can't imagine they would, but I can't imagine Trump cares about that. Um, they're suffering from a dictatorial government now that's taking all their guns away more than they did before. This taking the guns away has been going on a good 20, 25 years in Canada, and it seems to be increasing and increasing and increasing. Uh, so there's a certain amount of people that would want to go American, because with American, what you would have is, carry permits, and you could buy lots of guns, different kinds of guns. So, but I don't see any move whatsoever about making Canada a state. I see zero effort. The same for Greenland. Cuba, I don't imagine Trump would want to make a state. For what? It's just a big drain on American economy. You're going to have a lot of welfare cases in Cuba. People that are working are going to go welfare when they realize they can. You know, like the West Side Story soundtrack. It's like everything free in America. Uh, this was predominantly dealing with the Puerto Rican people that came to America because they can get American passport, and they just walk on a plane, go to America, and they're in America. And they want to stay 30 or 50 years or 100 years, they stay. That's it, you know. Um, and they came predominantly to New York City. They moved into ghetto housing. And I had a friend that was a social worker back in the mid 60s. His name was Arnie. He became a probation officer after that. But he told me what was going on with the welfare they were getting back then, and how they would borrow children from each other. So when the social worker came over, well, I don't have a birth certificate, senor. No, we didn't have the baby in a hospital. I have no birth certificate. And they get the aunt and the uncle who get a few kids. They tell the kids to shut up. And, instead of having 3 kids, all of a sudden they got 6 or 8. And, I'm not sure who the fathers are, senor. I don't know. It could be Pedro, it could be Juan, it could be Miguel, I don't know. And they would do this, and they would just get money for 6 or 8 kids. And that was a substantial amount of money. They'd pay their rent, they'd pay their utility bill, as long as it was in reason, the utility, which it would be. They'd pay for a phone with them, they'd have medical coverage, and in some cases, if they were going to go to work, they gave them they bought them a car, a used car, a decent used car, anything to get them working, And what happened is, no, they didn't get very many of them working. They got some of them. Look, I was in New York in those years, and some of them went to college and got out of it, Not a ton of them, but it did happen. And what a lot of them did was go into second, third. By now, they must be in fourth or fifth generation welfare. They learn the tricks in the trade because they share information and they know what works and what doesn't work and what fails and how much money you're going to get because they share the information and they know how to do it. And the social workers really don't fight them, okay? And they get Section 8, how, this kind of thing. Now, I don't know how New York does it anymore. This was back then. Um, and then I had a friend that was New York City cop, and he told me when you went into the houses, man, there was so many kids in these houses, you wouldn't believe it. And they were doing that to try to get votes and different people, so the whole welfare thing got out of hand. All right, so Cuba could do that. The problem with it is that it breeds second, third, fourth generation welfare. Okay? They're not rich, they don't have the life of Riley, they don't have it great, but they don't have the pressure. Okay, yeah, when they go get medical, they got to wait on some lines. When they go get their dental, they got to wait on some lines, right? When they got to go see the social worker, usually the social worker goes to them. So they don't have to go wait, they got to wait in the house, What's the social worker going to say when they got 6 kids? Leave the kids alone and come down here? Or bring 6 kids with you? No, they go to them, right? So these are the things that go on, okay? So I don't think he would do a state called Cuba. There's no income. I mean, unless he wants to do, the old, Trump casino resorts. Not just Trump. I mean, many other companies, Caesar's Palace and this and that. You can make a go of that. Prophetically, do I think there's time for this? No. Could, if there was time for it, hypothetically, let's say, could it work? Yeah. Yeah, why? Well, you got a warm climate year round over there. You don't have snow and cold weather, you know. You've got some hurricane problems, but they've been managing all these years, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal. The problem with the hurricanes, predominantly, what I noticed in Florida, is when you build your hotel or structure right at the beach on the sand, you get devastating destruction. If you go back inland a bunch, like a good 100 yards or so, from where the beach stops, or from where the sand stops, go 100 yards in, you beat most of the damage. Okay, now I'm assuming you got sand that's, at least 40 yards, of sand, So, believe it or not, with the hurricanes, that's the way it works, okay? If you set yourself back, like if you had a house 2 blocks inland from the hurricane and a 5 or something hit, what would you probably, the wind, okay, which you could, hold up against the wind, then you would get a lot of water, but you wouldn't get flooding more than likely. I mean, it could happen, okay, but usually it doesn't. It could. The best thing to do is evacuate. But anyway, that's a problem in Cuba. I know I've been in big hotels in Miami, and they got a beach and a beachfront, and they'll have a swimming pool down near the beach, because what's a hurricane going to do to a swimming pool? Nothing. Usually nothing, and then they got sand, and a lot of sand, usually like 50 yards or more, and then you got the area with the pool and the concrete, and then you go back further, and then you have the actual building, and it's pretty far in, so usually works out, okay. Now, if you get a 5 hurricane, it could make, problems, but generally it doesn't. Remember, when a 5 hurricane touches land, which would be where the beach is, it's a 4 immediately, okay? And then as it creeps inland, it becomes a 3 pretty soon. Okay, not in 100 yards. It's going to be a 4 for a while. But anyway, if they build themselves sturdy to protect against the wind, a big heavy structure rooted down deep, it's probably going to survive. It might be prudent to evacuate though. But okay, back to Cuba. So you've got beautiful beaches, okay? You have some agriculture there. They grow crops and stuff. They probably raise chickens and animals, and, pigs and stuff. I believe they have their own water supply. Um, so if America took it over, you could, open up the gambling casinos like the mafia did before 1959 with Castro, and people would go down there. In the 50s, they were running boats to Cuba from Florida. It's 90 miles, so you can get on some sort of any kind of a boat and go there. With people from New York and Maryland and Philadelphia and Boston and Maine and Vermont and, even down into Washington, D.C. and stuff would take a boat, like a cruise type boat. It would be probably about a 2-day trip, They could probably drag it down to a 3-day or, if they wanted to. And maybe it would stop on the way down, so it would be 3 days. And then in the dead of winter, they're down there. And, they get on the boat in the Northeast, and it's cold and nasty and snow and rain and freezing. They get on the boat, and the boat leaves at night, and they wake up in the morning. They're going to be in an area where it's a lot warmer than Boston or New York, but not so great. Then by the end of that day, by that evening, they're going to be far down south enough where it's going to start to be pleasantly warm. And then the next morning they wake up and it's swimming weather, Then they get down to Cuba and they get off the boat and they would stay, whatever, I don't know, they stayed a week, 2 weeks, and they could go back, Today it would be with airplanes more likely than cruises. So you'd fly to Miami and get on a plane in Fort Lauderdale or Miami to Cuba, and you would be there in, I don't know, 15 minutes with a jet. So I mean, it would be, you get on the plane, seatbelts, boom, you take off, he would get some altitude. I don't even think he would climb to 30-something thousand feet. He'd go up probably to 15, 20,000, then he'd start his descent. So he'd climb and then just come down. You wouldn't have time for coffee. It's such a quick flight. I mean, a jet goes 550 miles an hour. So let's say 500 miles an hour. So in a fourth of an hour, you go 125 miles, right? A fourth of an hour is 15 minutes. Cuba's 90 miles. So because Fort Lauderdale and Miami are a little further, and so it's going to be a 15-minute flight. Imagine that. Probably most of you never were on a 15-minute flight. I never was. I was on maybe 45-minute, 1-hour flights, but that was about it. A 15-minute flight is weird. Maybe I was on some in the past. I don't know. So you just go up and go down. That's it. So you take your airline stuff. Now, would they have directs from like New York and Boston to Cuba? But maybe not. I don't know. Would you need a passport? If Cuba wanted to make it, you need a passport. You would. If Cuba wanted to, well, yeah, you probably need a passport. And your credit cards would work down there. So you could, you could put up 25 hotels with casinos and big resorts and do it just like the mafia had it. But that might be what Trump has in mind. They certainly don't have any oil or natural resources that's of much interest to him. Now, the other side is, of course, Trump doesn't want to see China or Russia or North Korea or Iran or anybody working with them now. The rumor is they got 300 plus drones they can use to attack America. So that's one reason why the aircraft carriers are down there. They're sending a very heavy message to Cuba, as to what's going to happen. Now, I don't know much about the leader, and I don't know if he's psychotic enough to send drones into Florida, just to show Trump he's going to get even. I mean, Trump is never going to let them win. Okay? So something is up in Cuba. And that could be, he could definitely handle Cuba and the Iranian situation at the same time. Don't give it a second thought. The Russians used to use Cuba heavily with the Cold War. They would fly their members of the Communist Party, the elite, over there in the winter, and they would have a vacation from the grueling, freezing weather in Russia, below zero weather. They'd get on a plane and go for 2 weeks or a month or whatever they got to Cuba, where it was 80 degrees, and they'd go swimming and get a tan and get rid of the cough and the drippy nose and all of that stuff, and then go back. They also would, port of call, where the warships would call at the port of Cuba there, Havana, I guess, and moor up, and the guys would spend some time in Cuba, and things like this. It would open up the Cuban cigars in America. I think America is the only country in the world that doesn't allow the Cuban cigars. And that would also mean the Cuban rum and the Cuban coffee. And let me tell you, the Cuban coffee is great if you like strong coffee. It is super duper. I don't know if they sell it in Israel. Probably somebody does, but I don't know. It's sold around the world in a lot of places. It's really, really, really good coffee. But strong, it's strong. Okay, this is what Trump says on Truth Social. I think it was yesterday. I'll read it to you. It shocked me to read this, okay? If Iran surrenders, admits their navy is gone, and navy is gone and resting at the bottom of the sea, and their air force is no longer with us, and if their entire military walks out of Tehran, weapons dropped and hands held high, each shouting, I surrender, while wildly waving the representative white flag. And if their entire remaining leadership signs all necessary documents of surrender and admits their defeat to the great power and force of the magnificent USA, the failing New York Times, whoops, what did I do here? I got myself back here. I gotta find my place. The failing New York Times The China Street, the China Street Journal, oh, he calls that the Wall Street Journal, okay, corrupt and now irrelevant CNN and all other members of the fake news media will headline that Iran had a masterful and brilliant victory over the United States of America, period. It wasn't even close. The Democrats and media have totally lost their way. They have gone absolutely crazy. So, you see, the deal that Trump was promoting, it's not too late, you can have a deal, you have a deal. What it really was, and they weren't calling it this in the media, but I was, it was a conditional surrender. Okay, Trump was willing to put up with them, leave them laying around, still there, running the country, tormenting the civilians, but he wanted them not to be rocking the apple cart in the Middle East anymore, and they weren't going to agree with that at all. So now Trump realizes that the only way he's going to stop this madness with Iran is to continue to attack them. Now, what happened the other day when he attacked is interesting. There was a trigger for that. The trigger was Iran has hovercraft. What is hovercraft? Oh, it's like a structured UAV, you know, like a drone-ish thing, where it doesn't have a fuselage or a body. It just has shafts, and it's got these little motors with propellers. You know, maybe they're about that big. It has several of them, so it could keep the thing flying, and it, you know, the rotor thing could tilt and they could go forward, and they can hover. And they were putting, no, I don't know how big they are. They could be, you know, 12, 18 feet. They could have 8 or 10 of these propellers in there. I don't know. They were able to carry naval mines in these things. Okay? So what they were doing under the cover of nightfall is taking these hovercraft, which are generally going to be rather quiet, okay? They're not going to be on the loud side. They're going to be quiet. Take these hovercraft, right, and put them where they want the mine to go, and drop the mines in place. So this was probably, what, 2 days or 3 days ago, while they were talking, you know, they're singing John Lennon, you know, let's give peace a chance, you know, and they're singing let's give peace a chance, and at the same time they're laying naval mines. And they were also running go-fast boats around, which was threatening. So Trump attacked and said it was defensive. And, you know, I got to admit it was. It was. It's not super defensive, but laying mines is rather aggressive. Okay. And the go-fast boats were threatening. So Trump gave him an attack. And I haven't seen Iran acknowledge that attack. What Iran is talking about is they shot down an American drone and went after another American drone that I don't think they shot down, and they went after what they're calling an American jet, and I don't think they shot the jet down either, but they did tag a drone. bringing a drone down is one thing. Bringing down a stealth F-35 or F-22 Raptor or something is a whole other matter. Maybe the drone was stealthy, but I don't think it was full stealth. I don't know. But they did tag a drone. I don't think Trump is terribly worried about a drone getting hit. They got a lot of drones in America, and they're expensive drones, but Trump's going to just say the cost of war, which is actually a truthful thing. And, better a drone than a manned aircraft where you can lose live soldiers, The problem with the media is one thing. The problem with Iran is something else. See, in Trump's logic as a goofy kid that grew up with a very, very rich father in New York City, where there was no, oh, we can't pay the rent this month. I can pay you in 10 days. That didn't go on. People were paying him the rent. So, I don't know if he really gets it, but Iran basically is saying, oh, he wrecked our civilian stuff. Who cares? We're still here. We can launch missiles. We're a threat, and he's got to deal with us. He can't stop us. And Trump knows he can't stop us. This is Iran thinking. They know they know they can't stop us. So they really expecting some type of a surrender from America. It's crazy, but that's the Middle East. You're dealing with people that grow up with Sharia law, and they're worshiping, what they're worshiping, and it's crazy. They're not well. They're not well. They keep calling America, death to America, death to Israel. They call America the great Satan. No comment on that. And Israel the little Satan. And the way Trump's talking with the surrender, I think is significant. I always knew, and I verbalized it quite a few times, that the deal he was talking about was a conditional surrender. These are the conditions. You will not have a nuclear program. You will give us the nuclear material you made. You will not support Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis anymore. You'll reduce your ballistic missiles. You'll, all these things, right? And you won't charge tolls in the Persian Gulf, and you're not going to control the Persian Gulf, and they're not giving up on controlling the Persian Gulf and charging tolls. Trump did a post somewhere, right, maybe his social media site, where he said that there's not a single country in the world that wants Iran to be able to go charge ships tolls to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. And it's true. China doesn't want it, and Russia doesn't want it. Now, I don't think North Korea commented, but they might want it because they're really lunatic country, But who knows and who cares? But Iran didn't build the Panama Canal. They didn't build the Suez Canal. They just happened to be there. What if the UAE decides they want to charge tolls too? Well, we already paid to Iran. Well, that's not our problem. You got to pay to us too. If you don't pay us, we'll sink your ship. And then Qatar does it also. So now you're paying tolls to everybody. The way it's supposed to work when the mafia goes, what they used to do in New York, I don't know if they still do it, they'd have these little cards. They were about this big, smaller than a business card, and they would stick them under the door of a retail store. And they were saying it was a protection, a security company that would protect your store, right? Okay. And if you didn't pay them, what they used to do was some car would drive by and they'd throw a rock at your window and break your window, you know. And then they'd tell you, well, if you used our security company, that would never happen. You know, you'd put a sticker on your door and nobody would bother you because they'd know we'd go after them and we'd break their legs or something, right? So this went on for decades in New York, you know. And they wouldn't charge a lot of money. And some people wouldn't pay it and they put metal mesh like this up over their windows. Or they got those metal doors they pulled down over the window. And, you know, they never bother with it. They got insurance. And some people did it. They, you know, back, you know, before World War II, they were pretty adamant. You know, they'd send guys into the store to talk to you if you didn't do it. You know, stuff like that. So it was bad, and then it got, you know, I think by the 60s or 70s it was, you know, they got rid of it. Now, what goes on with the gangs in New York, in my opinion, is this. You're in a neighborhood and they got a gang, I don't know what they call them, they got a, you know, a hand sign, you go boom, 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 whatever, right? And they got a piece of territory. You know, their territory might be 6 blocks by 4 blocks, and that's it. And they go to the stores, and they tell the stores that they're going to give them protection. And they charge the stores money, I guess, depending on the size of the store. And, you know, I would say they would want probably at least $500 a month, and in some cases, a big store, 2,000-3,000. And would they actually give protection to the store, or are they just protecting the store from themselves? Well, both. They protect the store from themselves, but they also protect the neighborhood. Well, let me explain. They put gang members out on the street. They'll sit on a bench. They'll sit on steps, on a stoop. They'll hang around. They got cell phones, and generally they have a pistol. Okay, now a lot of times they'll keep the pistol in a bag that they could get rid of quickly, or they'll, sometimes they don't. The police are usually not that much of an obstacle to them, okay? And if they see kids, young people or old people coming in the neighborhood trying to snatch a purse, let's say, right? They grab some woman's purse and woman starts screaming. Well, there'll be several gangsters from the gangbangers distributed around the neighborhood watching, okay? They'll run after the woman, the one that grabbed the woman's purse, and they'll grab him and they'll just give him a beat down right in the street. They won't kill him. You know, they'll punch him up 10 or 12 times and take the purse back to the woman and say, here's your purse, you know. If they see kids, now they watch it at night too. If they see kids running around, breaking into cars, they'll grab the kids, give them a beat down. You know who you are. Do you know where you are? You know, boom, boom, boom. You know, this is our territory. What are you doing here? Burglars, they catch a burglar, the same thing. They'll give them a beat down. Now, the city police are not able to give the coverage like these guys do, okay? If anybody tries to stick up the store, they'll run after the guy. If the guy got a gun, it's no big deal. They'll shoot him. They got guns too. the guys in the gang are criminals. The gang is selling drugs. The gang is doing prostitution. The gang, likely, the gang may be fencing stolen goods from another area, or maybe not. They could be doing a number of things, okay? And the gang members are getting supported. They work for the gang, they get money, right? And the gang members do all kinds of different things, but these guys are the watchmen for the neighborhood to protect the neighborhood. And if something goes wrong, this gang member has to go and do a violent encounter 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a bright, sunny, cool day when everybody's out. He got to go have a violent encounter in the street in front of everybody, okay? And these are tough cookies. These guys are going to keep fighting until you knock them out or you kill them, okay? They're not going to stop fighting. And they're dangerous, okay? And they have to defend that piece of turf. And they're afraid. Not that they're worried about some kids robbing the store. They don't care about that. They're worried about the cops seeing this and pulling him in. Then he's got to go to jail. He has a gun that he's not supposed to have. He used it. They're going to say he's a gang-affiliated member with the tattoos and all of this stuff. And he's got priors, so he might get 7, 10, 12 years in jail. 20 years in jail, you know, depending what he does, what he did. So they're very nervous. But if they don't do it, the gang will kill them or his family. They know who his family is. So they're not happy doing it, but they do it. Okay? So how does the community benefit? Well, it's like the old days in the 40s and 50s where they had Italian neighborhoods where the mafia guys were there. What did they do? They did the same thing. Did they shake the stores down for protection? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they might. Okay? But if some kid came around to break into the cars or rob a house or mug somebody, they didn't stand around in the street waiting for it to happen like that, okay? But they would go looking for whoever did it, and they often found them because they had connections, okay? And when they would find them, they'd disappear him, you know, or beat him badly, break his legs, drop him off in front of the hospital. I mean, they'd probably just kill the kid. They would make sure that this character didn't come back into the neighborhood again. So the Italian people got to really respect the mafia because they knew that if they stayed in their neighborhood, the women that's, 79 years old could go out at 9:30 at night to a little grocery store and get a bottle of milk or something and walk back herself and nothing was going to happen. Because if you went around in that neighborhood robbing people, robbing stores, mugging people, purse snatching, breaking into cars, breaking into houses, you were taking your life in your hand because the mafia guys were murderers, experienced, practiced killers that would kill you if they could find you, and they had lots of criminal connections to find you, okay? And they would use them, and it was pretty dangerous for them to go around and do it. And they fight back. Now, to this day, it still goes on. There are still neighborhoods in New York that the mafia guys control where mostly Italians are living there, and they will still, protect uh, their people like this, the regular civilians. And what are they doing for money? Well, they could do all kinds of things. They're doing complicated scams. They're doing high-tech crypto scams. They could be doing drugs. They have no problem with drugs. They could be doing drugs. Bookmaking is not that easy with them anymore because you got off-track betting since the 60s or 70s in New York, where you could walk into a store in the neighborhood and bet on many, many, many different things. What is it? It's a store that you walk in. It's a small store usually with a glass window, and there's nothing in the store, but there's maybe one guy or two guys working behind bulletproof glass, and you could talk to them through a microphone or something, and you put money in a tray, and then they close it and they spin it, and it comes and they take it out, and they give you your ticket and stuff, so you can't really rob them. And that's what OTB is like, off-track betting. So that knocked down their betting game because people can do that, okay? And people will still go to them for betting because you could do it on the phone. You don't have to go out of the house in the winter with the snow, and you get credit and stuff like that. Okay? They give them credit. So they do it that way. They still get business. They do loan sharking, where they loan money to people where you're paying, 10% or 15% interest every week. They do that. They do fencing, stolen goods. They might hijack a truckload of televisions, flat screens, and bring them around the neighborhood, and the people they know that are civilians, they say, hey, here, take these. Here's 5 flat screens. Sell them and take your time. It takes a month, 2 months. It's okay. And then you pay me after you sell them. I need 300 a piece. They cost, 800 in the store. You could get 400 or 500, or he gives it to them for 250, whatever, right? Okay. They do that with jewelry. They'll do that with many things, stolen things. They'll do. It's a dangerous thing because it could blow up on you with the serial number. You could get into trouble. So, and so they wind up making money. But these guys are not the real mafia. They try to, in Hollywood, they try to make you think that. The real mafia owns the big casinos in Vegas, Atlantic City. They own big businesses traded on the stock exchange. They own lots of big things, not this. They also go into prostitution. They do that. They'll do cigarettes where they beat the taxes from another state. They'll do liquor. They'll do all kinds of stuff. They open bars. They try to stay open late past the hours the bars have to close. Things like that. So this stuff still goes on in places. I never knew it to go on in California, like New York. I don't know if it goes on any place other than New York. It could in Philadelphia maybe or Boston. I have no knowledge, but in Florida I never heard of it. You know, in California I never really heard of it. I know in California for a while they were trying to guys would try to shake down a bar or a nightclub, and if you didn't pay, they sent guys in that were, you know, like 6'2", 210 pounds, and they would start fights in the bar with people just to create chaos in the bar. And the bar owner would be very bad for business, and that's how they would try to bring them. The police usually could clear that up if the guy goes to the police, you know. All right. The Iranian Supreme Leader, now let's hear what he has to say. The name of this guy who may be in a coma or not in a coma, we don't know. Moshe Taba Khomeini, this is the dead Khomeini's kid, in a written statement says this, so it may not be from him. He may be in a coma. He could be dead and we don't know that. I really don't know. But we don't see him appearing live, so something's wrong, okay? With this very weapon, then he comes up with the Allah Akbar, heroic fighters and the self-sacrificing armed forces in Islamic Iran, supported by the Mujahideen of the resistance front, especially Deir Lebanon, were able to achieve remarkable victories against two heavily armed American Zionist terrorist armies during the third imposed war by relying on Almighty God, who and through their missiles and drones on land, in the air, and at sea, they targeted the great Satan, namely America, and its client entity, the Zionist regime, and witnessed with their own eyes the fulfillment of God's true promise to grant victory to those who arrive in his cause. More from Iran. Isn't it interesting that the Islamic Republic threatening that any Israeli strike in Beirut would derail the negotiations between them and the United States, while media outlets affiliated with the Iranian regime were reportedly instructed not to report on yesterday's exchange of fire with the U.S. so as not to jeopardize the negotiations with Washington. It's nuts, isn't it? So they're saying we're not going to negotiate or something unless the attacks on Lebanon stop. I'll be right back in a minute. Quick break. So Iran is desperately trying to save Lebanon, and Netanyahu is desperately trying to neutralize Hezbollah, but he's not trying to kill Hezbollah, which I think is the only remedy. Otherwise, they just come back at you again down the road. So I don't think Netanyahu's approach to it works. And I'm not sure you could trust these statements from the new Khomeini because, you know, we get written statements, we never see the guy live or anything like that. So they could conceal his death if he's dead. That's for sure. And they might be making statements and saying it's coming from him. Because I think the people believe this is a man appointed by their God or something like that, and it drives the people on or something like that. So they're threatening that any Israeli strike in Beirut would derail the negotiations between them and the United States, while the media outlets are not. Okay, so I heard, but we don't know for sure, they're saying that Trump told Netanyahu to cool it with the Beirut strikes so we don't derail the negotiations. Is that true? I don't know. I don't know. Rubio is saying the opposite type of thing. Israel can go defend themselves. We're not worried about that. So Rubio went to India. I heard nobody was there to meet his plane, and so they were, you know, they were giving him the cold shoulder. I believe Rubio is saying the straits need to be open. Straits of Hormuz, Persian Gulf. They're going to be open one way or the other, so they need to be open. They're saying what's happening there is unlawful. It is. It's illegal. It is by international law. It's unsustainable for the world. It's unacceptable. See, the longer Iran keeps the blockade type activities going, okay, the worse things get with the oil reserves. And they're hoping that if they could run this a few months, the oil reserves will be critical. They'll wreck the economies and deteriorate the West, and you know, this gaga goo lunatic land, you know. Goes on to say, I don't know of any country in the world that favors a toll system, or he's calling it a tolling system, paying a toll. The Russians are not in favor of a tolling system. The Chinese are not in favor of a tolling system. I mean, there's no country in the world that's in favor of a tolling system except the regime in Iran, so that's not acceptable. That cannot happen. But it, you know, it is happening, and they've collected a lot of money in tolls, and a lot of these countries are willing to pay it and just hope everything gets better and goes away. They don't understand that what Iran wants to do is start a caliphate. They want to make Khomeini the caliph, and they want all the countries to be incorporated under them. What Trump should do is Trump should go instead of talking about annexing Greenland and Canada and, Cuba, he should annex or make protectorates or something. Um, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, and Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. Put them under the American flag somehow. They would want that, but Trump puts his will on a lot of people. I mean, the guy in Venezuela didn't want it either. So if Trump did that, where would that leave Iran? Oh, it would leave Iran in a bad way. But they'd probably still be doing what they're doing until they get annihilated. So it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But it would give the Trump the real righteous oil czar status of the world. They could put a gold crown on him dripping with oil. He won't do anything like that. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are both in a mutual defense treaty. Pakistan dropped out of the Abrahamic Accords. They really had to, if they were going to maintain their status as a negotiator between America and Iran. So they had to. Or Iran would not let them be a negotiator. Okay? And since Saudi has a defense treaty with them, I think they had to follow suit. So Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have both rejected Trump's call for the Abrahamic Accords. To get involved in the deal, to have a say into what goes on. But Pakistan definitely has a say as to what goes on. Being the negotiator, they're dealing directly with America and Iran. So they got a heavy say into what's going on, and they're not doing Abrahamic Accords, and Saudi Arabia went with them. So Trump did say there'd be one or two states that wouldn't do the Abrahamic Accord, and that's okay, and I think he meant these two. But Saudi Arabia hates Israel, and as far as I'm concerned, we need those jerks like a hole in the head. So what it tells us is the Saudis hate Israel more than they fear Iran. But that's the kid, the son of the king that's gravely ill or something. He's an idiot, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he has no idea what life would be like under Iran. No idea. The UAE is a little bit different because they focus on making money, prosperity, stability, and the future of their people. They do give the people a decent lifestyle. They got a Sharia law going on over there, but I don't know if their Sharia law applies to non-Muslims. I don't think it does. Maybe it, I don't remember. But it's, you can't have a good life under Sharia law. Okay? Under Sharia law, a woman's say-so is worth half that of a man. And if you're an infidel, not a Muslim, I don't think it's worth anything. So, I mean, what kind of system is this? So, if Trump annexes these countries, then how can Iran annex them? They'd have to destroy America first. It's just food for thought. I don't know if Trump's going to go that far. There was a movie around 1964 with the James Bond stuff called Goldfinger. The villain was a guy who loved gold, and he used to smuggle it from one country to another so he'd sell it at a profit. You know, it's a fiction, you know. And what he was going to do was put a nuclear bomb. He did this in Fort Knox, and he was going to blow it up, but more of a dirty bomb effect or something, and make the gold glow in the dark with radioactivity for a number of years, so the gold in the rest of the world would soar in value. That was the plot of the movie, and then James Bond, of course, sets everybody free from it, you know. Goldfinger winds up locking him in the vault at Fort Knox and handcuffing him to the bomb, which is in a big box on wheels. And Sean Connery is trying to figure out which wire to cut to stop the countdown timer. Then the troops come in, and some CIA guy has a wire cutter and runs over to the where the wires are, where Bond's trying to figure out what to do, and he cuts the right wire, and there's a countdown timer, and it stops at the number 007. So you could, you know, which was Bond's designated number. So it was a joke, you know. I mean, it was a action comedy drama, you know. It was a good movie, though, you know, for movies back then, you know. All right. Wheat farmers in America are bracing for the worst crop yields in more than half a century. I would call that drought combined with flooding. Okay? Maritime trade operations said that the master, that's the guy in charge of the ship, the head of the ship, the captain of the ship, you know, the master of a tanker, report external explosions port side on the vessel close to the waters of, I believe it was Oman, at 9:45 UTC time yesterday. The crew and the vessel are safe, although the master reported some bunker fuel has discharged into the sea. And it's talking about some type of an attack warning that they got. The vessel is identified as Marshall Islands flagged VLCC Olympic Life and said it was proceeding to its new protocol. Well, I don't think the Americans did it. It sounds like Iran to me. That's your main suspect. United States Navy has again started escorting vessels through the Persian Gulf, Straits of Hormuz. So they did it quietly and softly. They're starting to escort the vessels. So as you can see, Trump is escalating. He attacked them yesterday, it was yesterday. They're actually 2 days ago. He attacked them, and now he's escorting the vessels again. And he's talking about their unconditional surrender. So he thinks that if he bombs them into dust, they're going to surrender. I don't know. I mean, Scripture tells us they're all going to leave the country, but that might not mean the IRGC leaves. They may get killed. So I don't know. Or they might leave too. Trump may encourage them to leave and encourage nations to take them in. That could happen. Trump really wants to get his hands on the oil, but it ain't going to happen. Escorting the ships through the Persian Gulf is going to be designed to get some oil out from the other countries and keep the oil prices down as much as you can. See, Trump is likely talking to Cuba, but not with the media knowing what's going on. And he's building the threat level up with all these warships there. I mean, let's take a look at the Cuban military, okay? I imagine it's pathetic. Let's take a look. Cuba military. How many soldiers, how many tanks, how many planes, how many naval vessels, how much artillery? Let's see what we get on this. 40 to 49,000 active troops. Okay. 113 to 300 plus tanks. So I'm pretty sure Trump got a better idea how many tanks they have than that. Okay. Mostly old Russian tanks. Okay, real old stuff. Easy to kill these things. 31 total aircraft. But a lot of their combat aircraft is likely not able to fly. "19 Navy vessels, mostly small coastal patrol craft looking for smugglers and stuff like that, They have a bunch of artillery, could be several hundred towed artillery guns, cannons, artillery pieces. Mostly Russian. Soviet era. They might have a couple of rocket pod launchers as well. And probably most of the artillery is usable. The rocket pod launchers, not sure. Well, let's see if they got air defense systems. Does Cuba have air defense systems to take down missiles, drones, and aircraft? Does Cuba have anti-ship missiles? Does Cuba have drones? We'll go a little deeper into this. It's easier to use AI than Google to look this stuff up, that's all. Yeah, they have older SAM systems from Russia, anti-aircraft. I don't know how many they have, and they're dangerous, but if the pilot's on the ball and got a modern plane, they're not that dangerous. And they got anti-aircraft guns, which are not very effective these days against American aircraft or Israeli aircraft. Their radar, these anti-aircraft systems, anti-missile systems, and the anti-aircraft guns are going to probably work with radar, and they're probably easy to jam because they're quite old. Castro got this stuff probably in the 60s, during the Cold War, and, the 70s maybe. They might be able to shoot down some drones, and maybe not. They probably don't have what's called a layered system like Israel does. When the missiles or drones come in, we shoot at them in multiple locations. As the drone travels, even before it enters Israel airspace, we start shooting at it, and we keep shooting at it while it travels in our airspace until we take it down. And we're very good at that. They don't have any modern anti-aircraft, ballistic anti-aircraft missiles. So they're going to have a lot of trouble working with a stealthy drone or a cruise missile or, most things. Basically, they might be able to attack helicopters, but maybe not even because of electronic warfare defenses. Not much going on with them. In other words, America is going to fairly immediately dominate the sky. They're going to attack all their radar. They'll attack all their anti-aircraft systems immediately right up front. And then they've got air superiority, and that's doom and gloom on Cuba. Cuba said they don't have 300 plus drones, that it was fabricated, although Axios said it did. I think Axios is an iffy source, okay? Um, so, Cuba's not really going to be able to hold up much of any kind of a resistance to the United States. Uh, Not much of anything. Israel's going to have nothing to do with this fight, by the way. Zero. We will see how this goes. Now, there's people that are saying, I found this on Telegram, Turkey is collapsing. The currency in Turkey is called the lira, Lira, and they're saying that the lira deteriorated 99%. Okay, this is all, somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, okay? I doubt that this was done with intent, but they don't know what they're talking about, okay? And I'll tell you what the truth is, okay? $1 buys 45 to 46 Turkish lira, okay? If we go back 2 years ago, it was about 40% better for the Turkish then. Well, actually, you could say maybe 30%. The Turkish lira, lost 30% of its value against the dollar. Okay, now the dollar's down, so the Turkish lira is way down. Okay, but it's not. They're trying to make out that it's, 900 lira to $1 or some crazy thing. It's not. If Turkey does go to Abrahamic Accords, which it may decline or it may not decline, the standard operating procedure for Turkey is Trump, give me F-35s. And Trump knows that, Turkey's not a reliable ally, and it's a Muslim majority country, and they're not going to likely give him any stealth aircraft. So what's happening with the rain and the drought is, 2/3 of America's in drought roughly, and the rain has been increasing, but the rain goes down very fast, and it gets runoff, and it doesn't sink into the soil and nicely and quietly stay there and help the crops. It causes floods which are destructive, and then it evaporates fast because the temperatures go up, and then they lose the water from the flood, and it's a problem. The landscape's drying out more rapidly as the temperatures rise, resulting in more severe and frequent droughts. So the prophecy of, is God drying up the waters in the daughter of Babel, and that's what we're seeing. It's not being reported, and Trump's not going to say anything about it. He's just not going to say anything about it. Okay? You're not going to hear it. Okay? And what's Trump going to do about it? Nothing. Nothing. He doesn't believe that Jehovah is powerful, and he doesn't fear God, and so forth. Okay, let me look at the live stream. What is it saying? Actually, California is not in drought now. I don't know if it is or it isn't. I don't know. I could look it up for you. I think let's look it up. It's not hard to look it up. Is California currently in any level of a drought? California is currently experiencing some drought and abnormally dry conditions again, although it is far better than during the severe drought years. As of spring 2026, about 55% of California is classified as abnormally dry. Small parts of the state are in moderate drought. The problems are especially tied to a weak snowpack and warm weather that caused early snow melt. Earlier in January 2026, California briefly became completely drought-free for the first time in about 26 years, but dry conditions returned during the dry conditions returned during the spring. So the short answer is California is not in a catastrophic statewide drought, but yes, parts of the state are again experiencing mild drought and dry conditions. So yeah, it's improved, but it still has some issues there. 2/3 of the country have some level of drought. More, really, I think, significant, to some large extent. So, that's a sign that nobody talks about, a lot of things people don't talk about. You shall have no other God before ye. I am a jealous God, right? So you got a lot of countries like, go to Europe. Okay, what do we got there? We got massive amount of mosques. We got synagogues that just want to make believe the New Testament and Yeshua never happened. We've got Hindus. We have Buddhists. We have all different kinds of Catholic churches and Pentecostal and nominal and all kinds of churches, and then we have atheists, We have the Church of Satan and all kinds of other aberrant churches. Okay? Now, you shall have no other gods before you. I am a jealous God. Now, can anybody make a case that this type of a practice, like what they do in Europe, is a good thing? That God likes it? That God's going to keep up with it and put up with it? How many people can come up with a good argument based on Scripture for that? I'd love to hear it. I can't. I can't do it. I don't think anybody can, but I'd certainly like to hear it if you could. I don't believe it's possible. And the same thing applies to what? You have it in Canada, don't you? You have it in Mexico. Do you have it in the United States? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Do they have a Church of Satan in the United States that's protected by the law of the United States? They do. So, can you make a case for me, please? Help me. Help me. People reject me and hate me because I talk about things like this. Can you show me I'm wrong using the Scriptures that, I say God's angry at the people for having a Church of Satan and protecting it, and for having these other churches with false gods. And a lot of you think I'm a nutbag because the United States does this and I say it's wrong, and God's a jealous God and he doesn't like it and he's going to punish him for this, and you don't like it when I say that. So why don't you try to help me and show me I'm wrong with the Scriptures? You got to use the Scriptures, okay? To show me I'm wrong with the Scriptures, then you know you're right and I'm wrong. But I nobody does it. Where does it say in the Bible that, did Yeshua ever say, listen, I'm no longer going to hold you people to Moses' law or the law? If you prefer to worship another God, go right ahead. It's okay. You don't need to worry about it. Go worship Satan. Go worship Buddha's belly, rub his belly. Go read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and go worship the woman with the 8 arms and the statue. Do I go worship turtles? Do I read that? I don't know. That I never saw a scripture like that. I don't think it exists. And if that's the kind of scripture you need to make this okay. But since such a scripture like that is absent, I don't think it's okay. I think it's wrong. And yet people run around, no, we're not the daughter of Babylon in America. We're a good Christian nation that just happens to support Buddhism and Hinduism and Satanism and Catholicism, praying to Jesus, motherism, you could call it, and stuff like this. How can you help me with this? Why does everybody reject me when I'm actually just telling you what the Bible says? And it would be idolatry. Why is this okay with you? And why do you think America's a great country when it does all this stuff? I'm lost. I don't know why. Why do you believe this way? When it's against the Bible, you say you're Christians, you read the Bible, you worship the Bible, but I point these errors out to you, and they're massive errors, because do you think you're going to go to heaven for eternity if you're worshiping these other gods? Buddha, the Hindu, praying to Yeshua's mother, all this garbage. You think that you're going to go to heaven, so you're going to go to the lake of fire? I mean, you're going to the lake of fire, and America's helping them. And I get kicked down the road. I'm the can they kick down the road when I point out that the daughter of Babylon is going to get destroyed, and it's America, and the angels are going to rejoice when it happens, and I'm showing you why, and you still kick me down the road as the can. But what am I doing wrong? I'm just trying to teach you what the scripture says, and you get rid of me. Is that what you're supposed to do? Think about it. I tell you scriptures and you reject them. Here, I'll give you another one. And you don't want to believe this. And it bothers me because it's going to hurt you. And you just don't seem to believe it. But it's in your Bible. Why don't you believe your Bible? This is Jeremiah 30, verse 11. For I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee, to Yesha, to salvation thee, to give you salvation, redemption. Well, salvation's different than that. It's salvation. Let's say salvation. Salvation thee. Though I make a full end of all the heathens, whither I have scattered thee, yet I will not make a full end of thee, but will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. Well, Israel's punished. It's almost 3 years. In October, it'll be 3 years. These wars are going. I've lived here many years, and I want you to know it's punishing. It is not nice living here during the wars. We have brief periods of time when, you know, you're not running to the bomb shelter and you're getting packages international and stuff like that. This is crazy. The U.S. dollar versus the Israeli shekel, around 1992, 91, 92 era, that's a long time ago, right? The U.S. dollar would buy 2.75 Israeli shekels. U.S. dollar would buy 2.75 Israeli shekels. I understand now it's buying 2.85 Israeli shekels. That's a double whammy, I'll explain. The U.S. dollar is going down and the value of the shekel's going up. So in the middle of this craziness, the shekel's increasing in value tremendously. Israel's economy is still good, but I need to explain to you that Israel's economy is still good, but many, many people in the Israeli economy are not having a good time at all. We don't own the defense industry companies like Elbit. We don't own these companies. This is Satan bought some of them, okay? And we don't own the big supermarkets and the big retailers and the malls. We don't own any of that stuff. So what do? We get jobs. The regular people can get jobs working for the Satan bots, right? See, the world is still upside down. So we get that, you know, and prices are still high, so we don't do that well. Is it going to get better? Well, the Abrahamic Accords, if it ever goes, would probably do that, but I'm not in favor of it. It's not correct biblical practices to come into peace treaties with your enemies that really hate you, that have a false god. How can two walk together if they're not agreed? And, you know, Trump is forcing it. Yes, we're not supposed to be entering into treaties with those squatting on our land, pumping our oil, and hating us. Why should we do that? Well, to Netanyahu and Trump, oh, it's good, you'll make more money. Yeah, you probably would. And it would probably make a lot more jobs and, you know, that type of thing. But that doesn't mean we're supposed to do it. The terrorism in Israel has been down for a long time. The people on the street getting shot and stabbed and stuff, that's way down. Bombs in the street. I think a lot of it is because we cleaned up Hamas in Gaza, and they were coming into Israel to work. I don't believe they do that anymore. And they were causing a lot of problems. Probably Hamas would come in impersonating a worker and then spread their poison to the people here, and then, you know, maybe they'd return back later that day. And, you know, they had a lot of terrorism. And we cleaned Hamas and Hezbollah out of the West Bank. There was a lot of big battles against them to get rid of them. So it's way down. So you're actually safer now from that aspect. I hardly hear of those reports anymore where we used to get them all the time. No. So it was Hamas predominantly doing it, and they're basically contained, and they got to get rid of them, and they're not. Nobody wants to get rid of them. They constantly say, we're not going to give up our weapons. We're not surrendering. And Trump and Netanyahu leave them alone. They shouldn't do that. Trump shouldn't be leaving Hamas alone and going and chasing Cuba. He should get rid of Hamas. But he's not. Netanyahu's not getting rid of Hamas. Maybe he's saving that in case there's a peace deal. He can start up a big fight with Hamas and then stay out of court because he's fighting Hamas. See, there's a conflict of interest that's going on here. It's very bad. Now, if you think that Jeremiah 30:11 scripture, which is unfulfilled, as you know, how could it ever be fulfilled? In the past, it hasn't been fulfilled. And it's associated with Jacob's trouble, which is Zechariah 12, and that's pretty much almost complete now. So you see this same scripture Jeremiah 46:28. And then people say, how could he be right? I'm reading it out of your own Bible. Why are you telling me I'm wrong? It's not yet fulfilled. Jeremiah 46:28. Fear thou not, O Jacob, that's Israel, my servant, saith Jehovah. For I am with thee. All the nations keep trying to knock us out, and they never make it, do they? For I am with thee. For I will make a full end of all the nations. The word is goyim, all the goyim. whither I have driven thee. Now, he can't drive us into a person, so it's the heathen nations. And I will not make a full end of thee, but correct thee in measure, yet will I not leave thee wholly unpunished. Okay. So now our terrorism is reducing, our economy is picking up. It's weird. I don't understand why the shekel is so strong. For a while, a few years ago, it hit 4, so $1 was buying 4 shekels. That was very short, though. It was hovering for years. $1 bought 3.75 shekels. Now it's down to 2.85, I believe. But let me check this. Hold on. I believe that was the number, but let me give it a double check. We just go to xe.com. No, it's lower than that. $1 is 2.83, so it's actually a little lower. Crazy. So the shekel is strong. The economy in Israel is supposed to be strong, but the people, 30% of the people, still have food insecurity. It's scary what it costs to go to the store here. It's scary, the rents. Course of the electricity. I mean, the food is just crazy. If you go back about 10 years ago, you spent about 600 shekels. We'd go to the supermarket. We'd buy meat, vegetables, fruit, garbage bags, toilet paper, soap, shampoo, all that junk, right? It would run about 600 shekels every 10 days. Okay, it's like tripled. Smotrich, our economic minister, said the supermarkets raised the prices during the war back to 2023 with no reason. He said it, and he knew what he was talking about, and then Netanyahu shut him down. Because Smotrich was moving to punish the supermarkets for doing this. And Netanyahu stopped them because the supermarkets, and they're still doing it. Nobody does nothing about it. If Netanyahu really makes a lot of money, is he going to rebuild the hospitals? Bennett wanted to build 7 new hospitals. Bennett wanted to put up 400,000 cheap housing units for us to bring the housing prices down. Oh, it would, because the people would move out of the expensive housing into the government cheap housing, leaving a lot of empty houses, empty apartments, and then the landlords could sit there and play Stonewall with the people. I ain't lowering the rent, and after a year of a vacant apartment, you'd be surprised how much they'll lower the rent. Okay. See, under Netanyahu, the tenants have to pay the arnona. It's the tax on the property. If the landlords are bad here. They're very bad because the law lets them be bad. Okay. But Netanyahu supports that because they got more money than the renters. Whoever's got more money is Netanyahu's best friend. The people that shop in the supermarket are not as rich as the people that own the supermarkets. Those are his friends. So he protects them, and the people could go eat dirt for all he cares, I guess. At the same time, the country is a social welfare state. I shouldn't say social welfare state. It's not that, oh, I don't want to work, I just want to get supported by the government. It doesn't work that way. They take care of their elderly and their sick people much, much better than most countries ever do. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Not um, that they're going to work with somebody that's 27 years old that just doesn't want to work. Well, I'm a prostitute, I can't work. Well, I'm a drunk, I can't work. Well, I'm a drug addict, I can't work. Now, the drug addicts, they do tend to retire them, and they put them on programs, I guess, they methadone them or something. They got various approaches to it. I don't follow it. There's not that many of them, but they're around. They give you, they guarantee you about 7,000 shekels a month for a cost of living. So 7,000 is about, I don't know, 2,200 US dollars, but it's not a lot of money to live in Israel. You'd have a lot of trouble living, but that's the minimum they give you. But in addition to that, they could get extra rent subsidy, utility subsidy, stuff like that. Do they have housing projects in Israel where you can move in and pay low rent? Well, the housing projects they did in New York were that way, and they, in some neighborhoods, immediately filled up with crime. Some of their housing projects were great. I mean, I saw a building they put up in the Bronx, in my neighborhood, that was, I don't know, I think 17 stories high. It had big balconies and views, and I never knew anybody that had a view apartment until that went up in the Bronx. Nobody. The biggest buildings that we saw with apartments were 6 stories. I lived in a 6-story apartment on the top floor. What did I see? Had a view of a schoolyard and a view of subways. The subway thing, I didn't have any, a view of other apartments. I had a view. But at 17 stories, they had a view. The old projects that they put up were 5 stories or 6 stories. They had an elevator. It looked like you were going into some sort of institution, like a government office building or something like that. And the apartments, though, were not that bad at all. And they set up like a campus, and they put 4 or 5 buildings up near each other. And they didn't do anything about parking. You were on your own for that. And they had a little parkish area in between the buildings with benches. Maybe they put a little playground up or basketball courts or something, not much. That's what they did. And but I never heard of that in Israel. In America, you got apartment complexes, right? I'll describe them to you. They're all over the United States. You go in and they got, maybe they got 10 acres. They got 2 or 3 swimming pools, or at least one. They got a big jacuzzi. They got a gym. They got a clubhouse, right? They got open parking, maybe with a canopy. You might have a covered parking spot, or you might have just an open spot. And they're usually 2 stories high, sometimes 3. And they run like a 2-bedroom is going to be, 900 or so square feet, 1,000 maybe. A 1-bedroom probably about 700. And they're carpeted, they got air conditioning, they got ductwork for heat. You got a thermostat thing for the heat and the air conditioning. You have a nice kitchen, you have a dishwasher, you get a washer and dryer, you have a balcony, um, and it's a nice place, right? I mean, it's not gonna be super luxury, but it's very comfortable. I never once ever saw anything like that in Israel. Never once. Never. Their idea of apartments is just a brick building and you got living units, and they can be noisy. Well, they don't have to be noisy. It just depends on the building, you know. If you're living with bad people in the neighborhood, they're going to play the stereo all the time and everybody's going to hear it. And if you try to do anything about it, you're going to have to go to war with them, you know, with bricks and bats and knives or something, you know. You don't want to live in places like that. There's not, I don't think, a lot of places like that in Israel. There might be some. And this is what you run into. A lot of these buildings go back before 1948, so they could be 100 years old. You know, some are walk-ups. Yep, walk-ups, no elevator. They got different kinds, and they got different different values, you know. So Netanyahu just makes our life terrible here, you know. He'll never speak to the fact that about 30% of people have food insecurity in Israel. He won't do it. He stopped Smotrich from punishing the supermarkets for doing this. They were profiteering off us, blaming it on the war. That's what Smotrich got mad about. He researched it as the economics minister and could see no reason for the food prices going up at all. They were profiteering and lying. They all did it. So Smotrich may not be a Satan bot, a real Satan bot. Would have known that. Smotrich and Ben Gvir might actually have gotten into office not being Satan bots. I don't know. I don't know. So that was pretty sad when I saw that Netanyahu made that whole thing go away. You know, the supermarkets should have dropped their prices back 10% at least. They punished the banks. They got punished. They didn't do anything to the supermarkets. They are bringing their prices down a little bit, but they're terrible. They're horrible. See, they don't do free competition. So if you live in a region like, let's say you live in Jerusalem, and there might be 12 reasonably large supermarkets there, they price fix. They all get together and they say, what are we, stupid? We all start, I'll bring my price below yours, and I'll bring it below yours, and then I'll go down, and I'll go down, and then we're going to go broke. So let's just agree what we're going to sell it for. Bread costs this, eggs costs this, you know, meat costs this, and that's what they do, the price fixes. It's illegal in America, but they do it here. So the poor people don't have a chance. So they do have welfare, but the people in the welfare system here, to get in it, you usually got to be very, very bad off if you're young. Something's got to be really wrong with you that, you know, real seriously ill, you know, real ill, you know. But older people at age 70, they make it easy. Even retirement age, but at 70, it's easy. And if you hit 80, they make it extremely easy. And at 90, it's incredibly easy. they almost force it on you. But at 70, you know, if you got to have something wrong with you, though. If you can't walk right, if you can't keep your balance, they'll do things to help you. If you, there's a number of things that can be wrong with people. We could sit here all day and read lists. If there's something really wrong with you, they go to work to help you out. If you just happen to live here for a number of years and you don't have a source of income, and you can't work because you're 70, let's say, they just consider you, nobody's going to give you a job at 70. Nobody's going to give you a job in Israel at 60. 50 is about when it cuts off. So they'll give you, they'll get you like that roughly 7,000 shekels plus other stuff. So it'll get you up to maybe $3,000 a month with the other stuff. I'll be back in a minute. So, the reason I think Netanyahu puts up with the supporting of the poor, which I think is something he hates, I think he hates that, is there's a lot of old people in Israel. Because you have basically a social healthcare system, so you can go as much as you want. I don't go at all, but I mean, I don't. To get treated, I don't go at all. But a lot of people do, and they get a lot of surgeries and stuff like that. So they're always going in and out of the hospitals, you know. I think that's the quick way to end your life, and it's a depressing existence sitting in doctors' offices. So, what see, if you made the doctors abundant, you could do it. Make it easier. Netanyahu did that with the lawyers here. He made it much easier for them to be lawyers. Why? So that people can go around suing each other. That's a sin in Israel. So he's bringing more sins on the people. You see how he works? So the lawyers can't make much of a living. A lot of lawyers don't work as lawyers. They can't cut it. It's tough for them to make it. All right. Now they could be a good lawyer, but they're just bad business people. You know. So if you did that with the doctors, what would it look like? Well, first thing you would try to do is streamline it. Like, there used to be a medical school in upstate New York called Rensselaer, I believe it was called, and I think it was up there where Kodak was, and it would do undergraduate school and medical school in 6 years, so they knocked 2 years off. But that was for real bright kids. A friend of mine from the next building got into it. They would, what else would they do? They could, they'd have to abbreviate the amount of years in school, okay? And they'd have to make the curriculum a little bit easier so they don't have to sit up at night and, I don't know what it's like for anybody in Israel to become a doctor. They do have it here, but I never knew anybody that spoke to me as a doctor and explained to me what it was like. But in America, there's a lot of people that go to medical school that have a very high IQ, like 150 or something like that, 152, and they got a photographic memory, and they go to class and they listen to the lecture, and they usually don't even have to read the book, but they might read the book. And that's it, and they're okay. So they're spending about as much time in class and studying as somebody does in undergraduate school. Not much. They got a life. Okay? They got hobbies. They can play golf. They can go swimming. They can go to the gym and lift weights. But they got a life, And they're getting A's and B's. And then the other, there's not many of those, but they exist. There's a bunch of them, okay? And then you got the others that have to study like crazy. And they go to class, and they get out of class, and then they go back to wherever they're living, and they study till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then they go to sleep, and they do it again the next day. And it goes year after year after year, and a lot of people just don't want to do that. Okay, I know people that could have become a medical doctor, but they didn't want to go through it, so they became a dentist, so they became a optometrist or something like that. They didn't, some chiropractic. They didn't make the same level of money, and they knew that, but they made enough, and they had enough prestige, and they were happy. They didn't sit there and rot. I mean, you go to college for 4 years, you're in pre-med, so you've got to really grind to keep your grade point. You need, I would say, at least a 3.5, or you ain't getting into any medical school, right? You have to go down to one of those Caribbean island medical schools or something, right? So you gotta have at least, I would say, a minimum of 3.5, maybe a 3.7. So you're working for A's and B's like crazy, and you got to take the hard courses. You got to take chemistry, biology, physics. You don't need a lot of physics, probably 1 or 2 courses. You probably need 2 physics and 3 or 4 chemistry and 3 or 4 bio. That'd probably be about it. And then the other stuff. But you got to keep your grades very high. So you got to work. Then you're in graduate school. You got to take the MCATs, the medical entrance exam. You got to study for that. Then you get in. And now you're, aside from the fact you're spending a fortune every year to be there, you're working Like that's your life, okay? That's your life. You're a study. You're a professional studier. The only ones that can really make it are the, 15, 20% that have the very high IQ with the photographic memory. And they go through medical school like regular college. They have a life. Now, the last 2 years of medical school, they're spending a lot of time in the hospital, so that time is eaten up. They're in the hospital, right? Okay. They have them practicing, giving physical exams, and different things, right? Okay. Then you get out of the hospital, you get out of medical school, you graduate. Now you're a medical doctor, but you don't have a license to practice medicine. You're an academic medical doctor. You got 8 years. Now you got to do an internship. That's a year. So you got to get some hospital to take you in as an intern. So you're applying all over the place, and then somebody accepts you based on what they look at in your medical, your medical school grades, and might want to interview you or something. I don't know. Then you're in a grueling 12-month program where you hardly sleep, and you're also studying. Not only are you working in the hospital, you're studying, so you don't have a life. Okay? Now, let's say you made it past that. So now you're 9 years into it, right? You made it past that. Okay. Now you got to do a residency. You don't have to. You could go through life just finishing your internship, and you're got a license to practice medicine. That means you could do surgery, you could write prescriptions, you could do all kinds of stuff, right? So if you join the Army like that, what do they do with you? Oh, you go in, you're a captain right away, and they'll probably let you do things above your pay grade, so to speak, because you don't have a residency. But they'll treat you, you might not get promoted as quick and as well as the guys that did a residency, but you're going to make good money, and you're going to have a good life, and you're going to get treated really well, and you could still retire out as a full colonel. You're just going to have to, get everybody to like you and this and that. And that's where a lot of these guys wind up, or they'll work for the government, or they'll work for a prison, for the state, for the prisons, or they'll work for the state doing something. They just don't want to be a serious practicing doctor. They're sick of it. They don't want to go anymore. They've had it, okay? They have had it, and it happens. Most of them go on and they become a resident. Now, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, 6 years. I don't know what the time is for cardiac surgery. It's probably a lot of years. You got to learn how to be, I think, it used to be you had to be a general surgeon, then cardiac surgery, so it was a long time. And now they get out of school, so they did 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, that's 8. 1 year internship, that's 9. Then the least they do is 3 years, and that's 12. Some of them are up to 15, 16 years. So they get out to like 30, 32. And now they're being treated as respectable members of the medical community. The other doctors are treating them with respect, and they got their boards, and they go to work somewhere, or they open an office, and they start making a lot of money. But they're like, let's say they're 30, 32 years old. A lot of people hit the streets with a college degree at 20, 21, 22. They've been out for you know, roughly 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years from the education system working, and these people are just starting life. Most doctors, in my opinion, are screwed up in the head. Okay. Most of the ones that become an optometrist or they become a chiropractor, or they're not so screwed up in the head. Are the dentists screwed up in the head? Not like a doctor. They're screwed up in the head because they're not making enough money. They make plenty of money. They get to be millionaires real quick, but they don't make as much as the cardiac surgeon and this and that. They get jealous. And, you know, the general dentist can make a good living. The one that does the root canals, or the periodontist, the one that cuts your gums, or these characters, they make a very, very good living. The vast majority of the medical doctors are messed up. Psychiatrists, I'm just giving you my opinion. My opinion on psychiatrists is they're bonkers. You know, run away. Stay away. The psychiatric profession, going back 50, 60 years, evolved from counseling and, you know, psychotherapy with talking, and that's gone. I mean, they don't do that anymore. What they train them to do is to diagnose and use drugs. They don't really, I mean, they counsel people occasionally and stuff like that, but it's the psychologist does that. They go to school for 4 years to college and then 4 years for psychology. They become a licensed psychotherapist or psychologist. And they're looked down upon in the medical community for the last 30, 40 years. And they don't really have much of a role because it's all about medicine. Antidepressants, anti-this, anti-that, you know, mood elevators, and they're just doing chemistry on the people. And that's what the psychiatrists are basically doing, is just chemistry and getting the people stoned in various ways. You know, they're not walking like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, they're giving them Prozac, Zoloft, other things. They wake up in the morning, they take it, and oh, life's good, what a nice day it is, yeah, you know, and that's what they're doing, you know. And I don't think that's a great thing. Where the psychologists used to sit and talk to people and teach people how to deal with their problems in life, but they didn't deal with people that were seriously ill. The psychiatrists did that. And before they were giving the people chemicals, what they were doing is giving them an electroshock therapy. That was going on well into the 80s. Electroshock therapy. They, you know, put them, did they put them to sleep? I can't remember. I think they gave him some sort of a tranquilizer. They gave him some, a snake venom that would stop their muscles from going too rigid from the electric shock, and they'd break their bones. So they got like a muscle relaxing dose from some snake venom, if I remember correctly. And I knew a girl years ago that worked for a psychiatric office, but she was a medical biller. She sat upstairs away from everything, and she just used to process the bills for them. to get them paid from the insurance. That's all she did, you know. But there was parties and dinners, and I went with her a few times and met these guys, and they were bonkers, you know. The one that I thought was normal was the old one running the practice. There was, I think, 3 of them there, and he was doing the electroshock therapy, and he thought it was really good. He thought it helped people a lot, you know. So they'd put a thing in your mouth, like a rubber bit, and then they would give you the shock, and you know. I think today they got it down where they just give you a shock for like a half a second or something. But I think it still goes on. I'm not sure. Then they did to a friend of mine's father was had a garage in New York, a parking garage. The guys came in. He gave them all the money, turned around and they shot him in the back. And I don't know, something happened with his brain and they had to do one of those surgeries. They were getting a lobotomy. And after the lobotomy, all his father did, he didn't work anymore. All he did was sit home and stare at the TV. He had like no emotions, or I don't know, I think maybe he was traumatized from the event. And what kind of life is that? He didn't, I mean, he knew where he was and stuff, but he just didn't have any drive or anything. I don't even know if he watched the TV very much. He sat in front of it all day. And his son had to run the garage and take care of him. And I think today they would just have given him various chemicals. But, you know, so that whole thing goes back, and it's, I don't know, maybe they think they helped people, but, so if anyway, to make the medical system so you don't have to wait to go to the doctor, you know, it's like walking into a store, you know, you might have to wait 5 or 10 minutes and then you get what you want and you leave, you know. So if they made it like that, they'd have to ease up on the standards to get into medical school. Then they would process more doctors, right? And they wouldn't make that much money anymore. So how many of them would really want to be doctors? You know, like in America, it's real easy for them to make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. If all they were going to make was $150,000, $200,000 a year, well, a lot of them wouldn't want to be doctors. They'd do something else because they're in it for the money. They like the status, the prestige, and the money. Okay? So they don't want to be like anybody else. So if you made the years shorter, you knocked it down by 2 or 3 years, and you could do that, knock it down by 3 years. So in other words, instead of 4 and 4 and 1 and 3, which is 8, 12 years, you knock it down to 9 years. Well, more people would do it, even though they got paid less. And you'd have more doctors, and it would be easy. But many years ago in California, they wound up with what the dentists considered to be too many dentists, and they stopped making money. They had a double whammy. They started giving the fluoride to people in the water, and the fluoride actually cut the cavities down. I saw it. I know it did. Okay? When I grew up, me and my friends, you know, you'd have 6, 8, 10, 12 cavities by the time you hit college, right? The kids were getting 0 cavities, 1 cavity, 2 cavities would be too much. You wouldn't even have that. And a lot of them had none. And they ate the same junk food that we ate. They didn't get the cavities. So it did do that. So they had too many dentists, and they weren't making the money they were. So what did they do? These bums, I'll tell you exactly what they did. They shut medical school, dental schools down. They started, I think they closed 2 dental schools. They just didn't want that many dentists anymore. They figured it would correct in a few years as dentists retired, and you know, dentists would die, dentists would retire, dentists get disabled, they have car accidents, things like that. And they stopped practicing. So they did that rather than make it easy to go to the dentist. That's what they did. And make it cheap. They didn't want to make it cheap. This is a true story. I know it for a fact. I have no doubt in my mind that is exactly what they did. And that's what went on. With the chiropractic, if you go back to chiropractic popped up in the 60s. Nobody really was bothering with it. It was considered a cult. In the 70s, people started going to chiropractor, and they started petitioning the insurance companies, and the insurance companies would pay for chiropractic visits, but not that many. Some would pay for 8 or 10 visits a year or something. It varied, and some paid for more, 12. It varied. And people started going to the chiropractor, and they started realizing that it made them feel better physically with their, the different problems they had with the back, the neck, the legs, the arms, the hips, whatever. And the chiropractors back around 1980 were making about $75,000 a year, which is a lot of money. Okay, and back then, a lot of you are not old enough. $50,000 a year in 1980 was a very, very good living. At $36,000 a year, you were very comfortable. Okay, you were really comfortable. 50,000, you were doing well. 75,000, you were doing really, really good. Okay, so it was a nice living for them, right? So the chiropractic schools were making money. These people were becoming millionaires running the schools, and they just kept pushing the kids in, pushing the kids, pushing the kids. Fast forward to about 2003, and there were chiropractors getting out of school that couldn't get a job. They wouldn't make it in private practice. They just, what were they going to do with it? I mean, if they had somebody supporting them, like the wife had a job and made money, and they opened up an office, and they stayed with it maybe for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they got it built up enough, they would make money, where the other guys would make money, like, after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they'd be fine. So that's what they did. And they ruined it for the economics. So there was a chiropractor back around 2003 or 4. It had gotten so bad, he worked for another chiropractic clinic doing the x-rays. When you become a chiropractor, you get a radiologist license as part of it. And they learn how to, because they do a lot of x-rays, so he learned how to do that. So he worked for other chiropractor, just doing the x-rays for them, just to make a living and feel like he was in chiropractic, So, when you'd see them, when they first got out of school, what they would be doing is some of them would have the wife working as the receptionist, answering the phone, greeting the patients, giving them the form to fill out on the first visit, doing the insurance billing, and the guy or the woman, whoever it was, would be in the back doing the chiropractic work, and that went on for a while, and that built the practice up. Now, there's such a thing as lousy chiropractors. In my opinion, 80% of them are no good. think only 20% of them are any good. That's what I think. Rebecca,
What?
is somebody working in our yard?
I don't hear anything.
Must be next door. I hear it.
Fans on the floor.
No. I hear stuff coming from. Yeah, that's all right. It's next door. All right. So that's the problem with the medical. So what's the medical like in Israel? I don't know that much about it. I've used it years ago, but I don't. If you go to the family practice doctor, what they start up with you, they drive you crazy. They want to get so many blood tests from you. They got to pull 2 syringes of blood. You got to go out there early in the morning because they shut down the blood tests at about 9 o'clock or somewhere. I don't know. You got to wake up early, go down there, and they pull the blood, and then they want urine, and they want a stool sample, and they want this all the time, redoing it. And then they start telling you what to take. Oh, you got to take this. You got to take that. And then they'll drive you nuts with vaccines. Nuts. They'll absolutely make you crazy. You'll be getting every vaccine under the sun. You don't pay a dime for your blood tests. And I don't think pay a dime for your vaccines either. I never got one. But they start, well, take a pneumonia vaccine, take a flu vaccine, take a COVID vaccine, take 2 or 3 COVID vaccines, take a blah, blah, blah plague pill, take this. It's crazy. I don't want to put down there and load up on vaccines. I need that like a hole in the head, right? And then they want you constantly doing blood tests, constantly coming in for physicals. And they believe that they're going to help you live a longer, more prosperous, joyful, peaceful life by doing this. I don't agree with it, but you might. I don't. And that's what. And it doesn't cost you much of anything. It may not cost you a dime. And they load you up, you know. I don't do it, but sadly, many people in Israel do it. So I got approved for home health care because there's things wrong with me. So I can't get a doctor to come to the house. Apparently, the only time the doctor comes to the house is if you can't get out of bed. Because then to get you to the doctor, they'd have to put you in an ambulance and wheel you into the doctor on a stretcher, and the doctor could work. And so they'll send the doctor to the house if you're in that category only. But I could get a physical therapist at the house. I could get phlebotomy, blood work. They'll come take it to the house. I don't know what else I could get. I don't know. I'm not going to come and have puncture me. I mean, for what? Then the doctor's going to call me up on the phone and tell me, oh, you got to come in and you got to do this and you got to do that. And, you know, people that are older can wind up spending much of their life in the waiting room of the doctor's office. That's not good. But on the other side of the coin, yeah, you got all this medical stuff in Israel that everybody has access to. You have to pay into the system, but when you retire, it's dirt cheap. When you have a job, the employer pays for you and your family, so you really don't wind up paying for it. And it's there. Is it good? No, I don't think it's that good, but I don't think the healthcare in the United States is that good either. I think if you go back to 1970s, it was good. But I don't think it's that good anymore. I don't think so. I have a friend, he's a little older than me, and he has had cancer, and they treated him for the cancer with all kinds of stuff, and they got rid of it. He's remiss, but they, I don't know, he got neuropathy, he can hardly walk. He uses a walker, he's got a lot of problems. And he has to take that narcotic oxycodone a few times a day for the pain from the cancer, what that left him with. And he's got other problems, and he goes, and I tell him not to do it, but his father was a doctor, so he believes in them. So he goes there and he gets different surgeries, and they don't do any good. And I tell him, listen, you're going to do the surgery. He gets, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever he gets for doing the surgery, and it doesn't work. What do they tell him? Well, we'll do it again. We'll repeat it. And, it's not a great idea. I don't think it's good, but he keeps going, and I was talking to him, he's telling me his schedule for appointments to the doctors. He doesn't sit in the doctor's offices every day, but he's going a lot. I know some other people that are pushing 90, and they're going, once, twice a week to the doctor, different doctors sitting there, and maybe they think that's why they're still around. I don't know. It's a rough thing, Most young people don't understand what it is when you get old. They don't understand how quick their life is either. They don't understand it until they get old. And it's hard. Your body just starts wearing out. And you start getting things wrong with you, and it's a problem. And then there's people that every time they get something wrong, they run out and have a surgery, and, or they go out and get treatments that are rough with, I don't know. But, and there's also a lot of things that they can't fix. Surprisingly, I think they can fix more and more cancers today. I think in Israel, they can fix skin cancer close to 100% now. But where does it leave people when they finish the treatment? I don't know. And they have people come in for preventive treatments, and they chemo or chemical or immune therapy. I don't know. Israel's a funny place, so they won't take care of you if there's something really wrong with you or when you get old. It's a surprise to me how well they'll take care of you here. If you're really in bad shape, they give you enough money. They'll either give you a home health aide for 30 hours a week, which most people aren't going to take because the rest of the time they're on their own, and they can't be on their own. So what they do is they hire somebody from another country. Instead of the government giving you the home health aid, they'll give you the money, and then you pay the person from the Philippines or Russia or whatever country they're here. They're not citizens, they're not Jewish, they can't make aliyah, but they're here working like that. And then that money is usually about enough to pay them. And they move into the house and they take care of the person 24/7. That's how the old people deal with it. Or if you're really in bad shape, temporarily, like you got into an accident or you had some heavy surgery or something like that, like you had a hip replacement or something, and then you need somebody in there with you for a few months to do that. And it's just the social system here. The other thing is if you have a lot of children, it used to be if you had 8 children, you didn't have to work. They give you more money. They give you a little money for the first child, a little bit more for the second, and then child 3 through infinity, you get a lot more money for. So you get to the point where you're receiving a big check just for having kids. It's an interesting system they have here. You pay about 15% for your drugs, and a lot of the drugs are made here in Israel, so it's not that big a deal. You know, they do have rare drugs that people have to spend a lot of money for, but I think it's far and few between. You know, they do different, like some surgeries they send the people to India to do. The health plan system flies you to India, and you go to a hospital, they work it out with India, and you get the procedure in India, and then you recover, and then when you recover enough, they bring you back to Israel. And it's cheaper for them to do it in India than to do it in Israel. So they do that. I don't know if they still do that, but they used to do that. So it's a funny country. Now, if we get rid of Netanyahu, which I hope we do, and the 2 witnesses come in, yeah, they're going to open immigration up, no problem. But if they're not in, and you have Bennett, would he open up immigration? No. No. The only one that would open up immigration is if we got the left wing in that can't stand the religion of Judaism at all, or Christianity, or anything, or Mohammedanism. They don't want anything. They just want atheists, or something like that. And they might open it up to foreigners, but I don't see any signs of it. No. Working permits that you could get. If some employer wants to hire you, you can get permits for 2 years at a time. You can get volunteer permits. We work as a volunteer for an organization for 2 years at a time. Different things, but you could get most people can get a 90-day tourist visa, no problem. And a lot of people, not Europeans, but from other countries, I think you could probably get it extended for another time, so you'd get about 6 months. And then I think you'd have to leave, but you might be able to leave for, I think if you left for a month and came back in, they would not bother you. They might say, why'd you come back? And then you'll say something and they'll say, okay, go to secondary. They won't call it secondary, go here, they'll call you into it. And they'll ask you why you came back, and you can tell them why you came back, and they'll probably leave you alone, or they may not, and a lot of it's depend on how tourism is doing in Israel. Right now, tourism industry is dead as a doornail. There's just no tourists. The hotels are falling apart. So there's a lot of restaurants that worked on tourism, a lot of buses that worked on tourism, a lot of Airbnbs that worked on tourism. All finished. That was a big source of income in Israel that went away. But it got made up for by other things. Now, the high value of our currency now hurts tourism, but that's not why tourism is down. But it would hurt tourism because they come here with their foreign currency and they're going to exchange it for shekels, and they're going to get fewer shekels. But the people would still come. If Trump finishes off Iran, I don't think there'll be a ceasefire. If he finishes off Iran, then the tourism will pop right back up. Actually, it'll soar because there's a backlog of people. Assuming everything else is equal and peaceful, which is probably not going to be the case, they would it would soar because there's a lot of people that wanted to come for these years and never came. And there are many tourists that come to Israel every year, or they come every 2 or 3 years, and they'll come back. They'll still all want to get back. They'll want to see how Israel's doing after the war, and, you know, stuff like that. You have no idea what tourism would look like with a temple that came down from heaven. It would go up huge, but the population of the world is going to be low. Jeremiah 30:11. I mean, there'd be no end to it. You wouldn't need anything other than tourism. But it's an interesting thing. So I don't know. Would Israel be able to support something like a Disney World, but not Disney World? Maybe they built an amusement park called the Bible World, right? This is a pet peeve of mine I'd love to do. Yeah, I think it would work well. I think it would work really well. You'd probably have to put it on about 80 acres, maybe 200. You'd have to have a big chunk of land. So you'd have to get that out of the government, and you would put up, 2 or 3 hotels right in the place, and you'd have to. You'd need $1 billion. You could run it just about all year round. There would be rainy days in the winter that people wouldn't be happy with it. And there would be hot days that people would not be that happy with it. But you could have Bible-themed rides, like Moses in the Red Sea. It'd be a little tricky to get it done, but you could get it done. Where, you go through an aisle, maybe it's 15, 20 feet long. You bring a group of 30 people in at a time. You go in and then you have the water literally part. You can make it work. Universal Studios has something like this. The water parts, and you walk through, and you're going to smell the water, and you're going to feel the water. Not that it gets on you, right? And then you go through, and then after you go through, you'd have to figure something out to make it, have Egyptians chase you, and they don't make it. Maybe you don't actually experience it. You go through a ride on a car, and you watch it. You could have it like that. You could do a million things from the Bible. There's no end to it. You can have an Adam and Eve with a serpent. You can have that guy that his hair grew and he grew claws. He ran around in the wilderness. The Babylonian leader. You could have that. You could have New Testament stuff, what they call the Last Supper. You could have the miracle of the wines, the first miracle, water and wine. There's just an endless number of things you could create and teach the people, right? While at the same time everybody's having a great time, You'd have movement in the ride, make it fun, and lots of stuff you can do. Like Disney has a Peter Pan ride. What's it, Peter Pan? No, there's an E.T. ride. I think that's at Universal. E.T. phone home, and you get in a cart. It elevates you, and you go and you look down at the different cities and see what's going. So you can have a ride like that where you look down and you got many different Bible scenes. And, you know, you're making fun. You know, in the middle of all that, you could have water slides, and you could have roller coaster and stuff like that. But I'm not a fan of trying God rides, you know, death-defying rides, you know. A gentle roller coaster with themes, you know, that's fine, you know. Not a death-defying, you know, when people are scared to death. None of that. I wouldn't do that. Water slide can be very pleasant. You don't have to have one of these where you go, whoa, you know. A nice water slide is a lot of fun. Could you run cruise ships off of, you know, have that park and then also tie the people into a cruise ship, and you have instead of having a Disney where you got demonic characters on the ship, you can have a cruise ship where you have biblical themed characters. And the people that work on the ship dress like they did when Yeshua came to earth, with the robes and tunics and, you know. What about that? You know. The problem with that is it's still a debauchery boat, you know. They don't see how much food they could eat. And, you know, I don't know how well that would work. I don't know if it's necessary at all. It doesn't seem to be. I mean, it would fill a purpose, but it doesn't seem to be necessary. You don't need to do it. I think what Disney does is they use the Disney characters to back up the debauchery of the cruise. You know, drink, eat, more eat, you know, walk around in a skinny little bathing suit in front of everybody. You know, I don't think it makes sense. But it would be interesting, but I don't think you need it. It could work, but you don't need it. You could have modest clothing, you know, but you could also knock out the swimming pool. Nobody really uses the swimming pool on the cruise. It's a junky swimming pool. They're all, you know, salt water a few feet. You don't even need it, you know. You get rid of that let's lay in the sun in a scanty thong. You gotta get rid of that. That's about it, I guess. You know, so. We'll watch what Trump's doing now that I see Trump talking about surrender. See, he was always doing a surrender, but a conditional surrender. Now he's getting more and more finished with them. There's a ceasefire and they're laying more naval mines. He's telling them to cut it out and they're putting more mines down. So he said, okay, this is getting stupider and stupider. And he's starting to wake up. Why he's still dragging his feet, I don't know. I don't know what's making him drag his feet anymore. I've lost understanding. All right, so I'll get a prayer out for us. My Heavenly Father, Jehovah, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, I pray for me and my wife, all the true believers and their households. I pray we have strength, stamina, and endurance, and I pray we have your healing and recuperative power flowing through us. And I pray for our animals and pets and ourselves that we be safe and secure, happy, healthy, and whole. And I pray for the peace of Yerushalayim, I pray if anybody needs a job, they get a good job. If anybody needs more clients and customers for the way they do business, they find it. I pray we all have adequate money and then some. I pray I can make better videos. I pray the offerings pick up. I don't know why people are mad at me and don't give offerings. I'm confused. I don't know why. I'm lost. I know some reasons why they're mad at me. I covered that with you today. And I pray for we all would understand the scriptures better. And I pray that we don't suffer any more damage in Israel that needs rebuilding with drones and bombs and bullets and missiles and all that. And I pray all this to you, my Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and you can agree with that. And I would ask you to pray that my offerings pick up, and I would ask you to do that, okay? B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, okay? And now I'll do spiritual warfare, which will be a little different. My Heavenly Father, Jehovah, I pray for me and my wife, all the true believers, and our households and families. If any members happen to have an unclean spirit, I command the unclean spirits to depart from those people immediately and never return again. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. And if there's any witchcraft or sorcery directed at any of these people, I cast it null and void for all time, no value, no effect forever. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. And you can agree with this too. And we'll keep you posted as to what's going on in Israel and Iran. And I think we're going to see a breakout of the war. And I send my shalom to... Oh, please pray for my hernia. My hernia is still starting to bother me. I think it has something to do with my diet, which I'm going to be changing. But please pray my hernia stops bothering me. It comes up with some kind of pain every now and then. Please pray that it stops. I appreciate that, and I'm not about to go get it operated on. I don't trust them that much in Israel, believe me. And I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach, and I'm out.